The world was waiting. Whitney Houston had conquered America with her debut album, but conquering America and conquering the world were two entirely different challenges. At 23 years old, she was about to embark on her first major international tour, a journey that would take her from the familiar stages of American arenas to venues in countries where her name was still being learned, her voice still being discovered. What happened over the next 8 months wouldn't just establish Whitney as a global superstar. It would prove that exceptional talent, when properly presented, could transcend every barrier of language, culture, and geography. But this story begins with doubt, with the kind of uncertainty that even the most successful artists experience when they're about to step onto stages in countries they've never visited, singing to audiences they've never met. Whitney's debut album had been a phenomenon in the United States, spawning multiple #1 singles and establishing her as the new queen of pop and R&B. But success in America didn't guarantee success anywhere else, especially for a young African-American woman whose musical style was rooted in gospel and soul traditions that weren't universally understood or appreciated. Clive Davis and the team at Arista Records understood that Whitney's international breakthrough required more than just booking concerts in foreign venues. They needed to craft a presentation that would introduce her to global audiences as more than just another American pop singer. She needed to be presented as a once-in-a-generation talent whose voice could communicate emotions that transcended cultural and linguistic barriers. The tour would need to be a musical diplomacy mission, with Whitney serving as both performer and ambassador. The preparation for the world tour was more intensive than anything Whitney had ever experienced. This wasn't just about rehearsing songs and choreographing dance moves. This was about understanding different audience expectations, different performance traditions, different ways of connecting with people who might not understand English but could feel the emotion in every note she sang. Whitney spent months working with vocal coaches, choreographers, and cultural consultants who helped her understand what she would encounter in each country. The first international stop was the United Kingdom, a market that had historically been challenging for American R&B artists, but was essential for establishing global credibility. The British music press was notoriously difficult to please, and British audiences had their own expectations about what constituted authentic soul music. Whitney arrived in London knowing that her performance at venues like Wembley Arena would determine whether the rest of the international tour would be a triumph or a disaster. The London concerts were a revelation that surprised even Whitney's most optimistic supporters. British audiences, initially polite but reserved, were transformed by Whitney's live performance in ways that no one had anticipated. When she opened with Greatest Love of All, delivering the song with a vocal power and emotional sincerity that filled every corner of Wembley Arena, the response was immediate and overwhelming. This wasn't just applause, it was recognition. The sound of people realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. What made Whitney's international performances so powerful was her ability to connect with audiences on a purely emotional level, regardless of their cultural background or musical preferences. Her voice became a universal language that communicated feelings everyone had experienced: love, loss, hope, triumph, vulnerability. When she sang "How Will I Know" in front of audiences who might not understand every word, they understood the joy and uncertainty in her voice. When she performed Greatest Love of All, people who had never heard the song before could feel its message of self-empowerment and personal strength. The European leg of the tour became a series of cultural exchanges that expanded Whitney's understanding of her own artistry. In Germany, she discovered audiences who appreciated technical vocal excellence with an intensity that surprised her. In France, she found listeners who responded to the romantic vulnerability in her ballads. In Italy, she encountered crowds who treated her concerts like celebrations, singing along even when they didn't know the words. Each country taught her something new about how music could function as a bridge between different ways of experiencing the world. The technical challenges of mounting an international tour in 1987 were enormous. This was before the internet, before global communication had become instantaneous and effortless. Every venue had different acoustic properties, different staging capabilities, different audience expectations. Whitney's team had to adapt the show for each location while maintaining the core elements that made her performances special. The lighting, the sound, the pacing, everything had to be adjusted without compromising the emotional impact that made Whitney's concerts unforgettable. Japan represented perhaps the biggest cultural leap of the tour. Japanese audiences had their own relationship with American popular music, and their concert etiquette was completely different from what Whitney had experienced in the United States or Europe. The initial performances in Tokyo were met with polite but restrained appreciation that left Whitney wondering if she was connecting with the audience at all. But by the final shows, something magical had happened. Japanese fans had embraced Whitney with a devotion that would last for decades, recognizing in her voice a level of technical perfection and emotional honesty that aligned with their own cultural values. Australia and New Zealand offered Whitney her first taste of performing for audiences. In the Southern Hemisphere, people who were experiencing her music during their summer while she had left winter behind in America. The energy at these concerts was different, more relaxed and celebratory, reflecting the outdoor festival atmosphere that characterized much of the Australian music scene. Whitney discovered that her voice sounded different in these acoustically unique venues, and she learned to adjust her performance style to match the more casual but equally enthusiastic response of Australian crowds. The behind-the-scenes reality of the world tour was exhausting in ways that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. The constant travel, the jet lag, the pressure to deliver perfect performances night after night, the isolation of being far from home for months at a time, all of these factors tested Whitney's physical and emotional endurance. But they also revealed reserves of strength and adaptability that she didn't know she possessed. Each challenge overcome made her more confident, more capable, more truly professional in the deepest sense of the word. The media coverage of the world tour transformed Whitney from an American success story into a global phenomenon. Music journalists in every country wrote about her performances with a level of enthusiasm and respect that established her reputation as a serious artist rather than just a pop sensation. The reviews weren't just about her voice, though that remained the central focus. They were about her stage presence, her ability to connect with diverse audiences, her professionalism, and her obvious dedication to giving every audience the best possible experience. By the time Whitney returned to the United States at the end of 1987, she was a different artist and a different person. The world tour had given her confidence in her ability to communicate with any audience, anywhere, under any circumstances. She had learned that her voice was more than just a beautiful instrument. It was a bridge that could connect her to people regardless of their background or nationality. She had discovered that performing wasn't just about singing songs, it was about creating moments of shared human experience that could transcend every barrier. The commercial impact of the world tour was staggering. Album sales exploded in every country she visited, and Whitney's singles began climbing international charts with a consistency that proved her appeal wasn't limited to any specific market or demographic. The tour had accomplished exactly what Clive Davis and Arista Records had hoped. It had established Whitney Houston as a truly global artist whose appeal transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. But perhaps the most important impact of the 1987 World Tour was personal. Whitney had proven to herself that she could handle the pressures and opportunities of international stardom. She had learned to trust her instincts, to adapt to new situations, and to maintain her artistic integrity even when performing for audiences whose expectations she couldn't predict. The young woman who had left America as a successful recording artist returned as a confident global performer who understood that her gift was meant to be shared with the entire world. Looking back, Whitney Houston's 1987 World Tour stands as a masterclass in how exceptional talent, when properly supported and intelligently presented, can create connections that transcend every boundary. Whitney didn't just sing songs in foreign countries. She created moments of universal human recognition that reminded everyone present why music matters, why art matters, and why some voices are powerful enough to unite people regardless of the differences that might otherwise divide them. That 23-year-old woman who embarked on her first world tour returned home 8 months later as something unprecedented. A global superstar whose voice had become a universal language of hope, love, and transcendent human possibility.